Keyboard commandos, are you ready? I'm always ready to talk about lossless scaling frame generation. In this video, we're going to talk about why your input latency gets higher or why your base FPS is lower when you use the mode, and what its aim is and what you can do about it. Let's get into it. So I was doing some research back in April, and I was trying to figure out, like, right now, I'm being very aggressive in this scenario. I wonder if I should set it to performance. Yeah, no, I think this will drive the point home. I'm using performance mode with the transformer model here, and we're getting 110-ish FPS. Let me see if I hit, there we go. I just reset it. So we're getting about 112-ish FPS. There was a spike there. So it's fixing itself. But anyway, I'm trying to figure out, man, like, okay, I want to go from, you know, whatever number I'm at, 70 something, you know, in this case, 100 something. And I want to go up to 160 FPS. For this monitor, it's 165 hertz panel. It is a KTC HS32S17 HDR 400 monitor, VA panel. So when I started digging into were the config files of lossless scaling, which are here, and while looking at the explanation for all of these, came up to real timestamp tolerance. And I think the original value, base value, is 0.05. Okay. This setting pretty much determines the acceptable margin of error for synchronizing frame timestamps during when it's doing the frame generation. So like the 0.05 is a very tight window. It's about 5% of deviation when lining up the generated frames with the rendered ones. So the point is to smooth out the inconsistencies in those frames coming together to present the a smooth picture. This is very important because the base frame rate, as I'll show you in a fight here, is going to move around a lot. Like even now, it's been moving around. So adjusting the value might improve stability or reduce visual artifacts, but increasing it too much could just introduce latency or other unintended side effects. So because this window is so tight, you go from 112 FPS. Well, let me just show you. Let's just go ahead and quickly enable it. And in the top left corner, we're hitting 160 FPS, but as you can see on my monitor over here on the right, we dropped to 70. It's still not bad for an input, right? Matter of fact, because it's a little higher than 60, while there are visual artifacts, of course, they're not as prominent as I'm used to seeing, especially when your base FPS is like sub 60, even in the 40s or 30s and stuff like that. But right now, why is it doing that? Because what it's wanted to do is create a situation in which my movement is smoother. Not perfect, but it is a lot smoother. And that's because this is working with me not locking the base rate to anything. Like, I'm allowing it to run as high as it can possibly go here. And it's just saying, hey, we're gonna be anywhere from 63, it dropped, all the way up to 70, depending on the angle. Now, a larger tolerance, if we increase this number, that 0.05, it could make it harder to maintain smooth transitions. And so then you get like hitching. Now, if we do loosen it, then I can get back some of our, base frame rate, right? Because we went from 112. I just wanted to go up to 160, but we went all the way down. So we gave up all of that input speed, quote unquote, right? We increased our latency, but we increased at the same time the visual smoothness. So especially adaptive mode, it's about choosing which one, to be honest, that you prefer. Now in this scenario, it doesn't feel terrible at all because I'm still getting 60 FPS, but now I'm getting some artifacts because of it. Now, let me break down as I understood it when I was doing the research. So what if I wanted a tighter tolerance? Because if I understood it correctly, the setting is responsible for how close the perfect frame pacing a real frame can be for it to be shown. And it represents a percentage value. So let's say at like 0.1, targeting 120 FPS, a real frame would be accepted if it showed up between 7.49 and 9.16 milliseconds after the previous frame. So if like the default value, I think it was like 0.04, but the acceptable range for the frame would be 7.99 and 8.66 milliseconds. So technically the higher the frame rate, the larger there should be of the variable for the tolerance. So like say if I changed that to, instead of 0.04, 0.05 to 0.1, it would let more real frames through, because with adaptive mode, almost all the frames you see are generated anyway. So moving that threshold to 0.1 would increase the time interval for the real frames to be accepted. So frame pacing would suffer a little bit, but then it would reduce the workload on the GPU from that process and then give me back some of the input. There wouldn't be as high of an input latency because I would be getting some speed back with the real frames coming back in. So what we may get is uneven frame pacing, which you would see like major hitches. So what I want to do here is move this number up. And what I want to do is push it as far as it would go and see if we can break the pacing. So again, we're down to 60, and let me just run around. You'll see what I mean. There's gonna be a lot of running in circles, so apologies if that makes you motion sick in the scenario or not. But if we're just moving around, our frame time graph for our base frames is relatively smooth. And that's what adaptive mode is really trying to maintain or control. And if I weren't typically uploading my gameplay to the channel, because I want it to be as, I guess, clean as possible, I would probably play like this, to be honest. I mean, we're using, it's not like frame generation is in the game. So what we're seeing is as good as it's going to get pretty much for where the tech is right now. But you can see nothing's breaking. So let's turn this off. Yeah, we even got into the 70s right there. Like I said, it just depends on where you are in the scene. What if we just take this and we just crank it all the way up to 0.5? So this is really loose, by the way. And it should reflect this. So let's toggle this back on. Well, it'll reflect it as much as this graphics card can. So now we're at like 64, 60, Now we're all the way back up. So we got 20 of the frames back. Essentially, we're in between where we were versus turning that on. And now I'm just going to run around. And I'm going to let you see what happens. You saw that? Even the graph reflected that spike. So we got the hitch. But you see, it's not consistent. It probably depends on what's happening on screen, but sometimes it kind of drags a little bit. This is a VRR display, by the way, too. It found itself after a bit of moving around, but it definitely did break itself. Oh, right. I saw it right there. His head moved kind of juddered a bit. So what happens is we trade out. We're allowing, instead of locking the base frame rate down, which is what you would typically do for frame gen, we're just giving it a range of acceptable frames so that we can get smoothness out of it at the trade-off of some of our frames in the form of now input latency, because we're being presented more frames, but we're losing the base ones. This is why you need to have it higher, not only just for the visuals, but for how it feels. Which, ironically enough, the transformer model helps lossless scaling's frame generation, because you can be more aggressive and help yourself have a higher base so that you can use something like this. That way you don't have to find a spot and then lock it down. Now I could do that. I mean, you could definitely still do that in this mode. You could, I don't know, put it at 90, for example, or you could just put it at 80 and double times 2. You could double the frame rate, but then you would be locking yourself down specifically to an 80 FPS input, which is about where this is. Now, if we turn it back off, and then I come back in here and I say, let's put this to 0.2. Right? Is there like a happy middle ground? We're not in the 80s anymore. We're down in the 70s. But if we start, so it did spike a little bit right there. I'll definitely replay this. I hope that YouTube isn't destroying the whole comparison here. But there are just moments where, as it's trying to feel out a certain section, that suddenly it just stutters. Now, this is really an area of just like the camera. I don't think you would see as much of a problem in this game if you were like in the middle of a fight, because you're not moving as much or moving away from like your target fight. But this feels better. You're getting just a little bit more input back. And if you can see right here, if I can use this section, you still have your artifacts, but they're, you see like that halo. If we turn that off and we make this even higher, see how we're not getting anything like that. It kind of leaves like ghosts of his, like where his head placement was. But like I said, I don't think there's like a particular number for your card. I'm just showing you the setting because this is something that you would need to take into account for your system. But it is letting more frames through. So let's go to a different spot here while this is on. See, there's that big spike. and there's another one. So yeah, like you're getting that. It feels like you're playing an Unreal Engine game when you increase the threshold. But like I said, when you put this back to where it was I think it was 0.04. We were crazy aggressive with that. But if you put this point back to like 0.4 or whatever, and then you turn it on, you know, just let that even out for a second. Yeah. So now you see, like, when I turn how much more, that's where the artifacts are coming from. Actually, you can even kind of see how the when I pan around, like the background breaks down too. But it's doing that because it's prioritizing the frame pacing. So typically what will happen, as much as I try to break the fluidity, like even with that spike right there, it's really hard for you to, like that spike that was on the frame time graph, you really can't see it show up as I move around. So that's what you're trading out. So then it's up to you to figure out what the threshold is, or what you're willing to accept to the sweet spot for you to keep playing. But turning that back off, I think I had found like, I think it was like 0.2 or 3 or something like that, where I was hanging out at. That way I'm not capping anything. And even when you do that, there's less of the ghosting around his head, because you actually have more frames that you're using. Like that slight little change can help your visual presentation and can give you a slight reduction in your input latency. But you just got to find the sweet spot, because if you go too far, as I showed earlier, you get a big spike and then the presentation breaks. So even if YouTube somehow destroys that whole example, I hope you go and you use the setting in your app. So again, if you pull up your folder, was it in here quickly? No. So look, just go to on my computer, go to your program files, go to Steam, then go to Steam apps common, and then lossless scaling. And then you scroll down and there will be the config.ini. And you double click on that. And that's how you get in here. And that's how you play with your real timestamp tolerance. And then just find out, just try to break it, right? With that setting, move it, save it, hop back in your game, and then play around with it. And then backpedal from there. And you can find the sweet spot. Otherwise, you just go back to using the traditional like ×2 or 3 or whatever like that to make it more consistent that way. But yeah, that is, let me pull back up to balance. So yeah, we're still getting, I did a few things there at the beginning. You can see on the frame time graph, a little drag. Now that I'm forcing the GPU to do a little more work. But yeah, that's all I have for it, man. Like I said, those were thoughts I had when I was playing the game last month. It was a couple of weeks ago. And I was like, dang, I wonder if you can get some of that base FPS back when you're playing. but still leave that intact. Like essentially not leaving it as tight as the developer did. And those were for good reasons. Because then the frame pacing is near perfect. But then you get more artifacts around the character. And as you can see, even moving around now with the head and stuff, there's so much less. It's while still using adaptive. But let me know in the comments what you think. Your thoughts on using adaptive versus fixed. Do you think it's worth going in the configuration files or just sticking with something, you know, like this, where if in fixed I had 74 or 70, you know, if I had 70, right, then it would only go up to 140 on fixed. Now we do have integer, but I don't even want to use integer. If I use this, it just says, hey, at any point, I'll let the game just render what it can, give it a little more back. And in here, I'm getting 70-ish frames per second, and then it's taking that and going all the way up to 160. This doesn't feel bad, but appreciate you stopping through. If you like this kind of content, I have been producing more of it. Consider dropping a like on this video with your comment, and also consider subscribing, because I like doing tests like this and doing some gameplay at the same time. Until next time, be the meta. Peace.